The Beyond the Textbook podcast is a CJSW production. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspot, and Goodstoney First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6.
Together, through teamwork and collaboration, I'm confident that you will find new ways for businesses to innovate and address some of these challenges.
Empower will continue to connect with academic communities beyond borders to ensure innovation is accessible for female entrepreneurs. With Adaeze Calgary, entrepreneurship starts with empowerment.
The TD Entrepreneurship Challenge League A regional champion is University of Calgary.
This is what a pitch competition is like. It's a very high stakes, stressful situation, but it's a long-standing practice in social entrepreneurship.
Hi, I'm Cole.
I'm Arisana.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Katrina.
And we're students at the University of Calgary, which is known as Canada's Entrepreneurial University.
While Calgary is a leading startup and innovation hub in Canada.
And as students who have participated in the entrepreneurial process through pitch competitions, we can say firsthand that they're stressful and often highly competitive.
Whether you've done it 10 times, whether it's your first time, everybody's nervous. That's what I've noticed. I don't think I've heard from a founder where they're like, yes, I'm good. I don't have any nerves. I'm ready to go, because you have like 3 to 4 minutes to pitch your idea and get your point across, followed by a couple questions. It's scary.
We always thought this was the only path in surviving as an entrepreneur.
But then we spoke with the Social Innovation Hub.
And they shared how their initial idea for a pitch competition for Indigenous tech entrepreneurs shifted to an Indigenous tech showcase. This is because the idea of a pitch competition, the idea of competing against one another and deeming one person the winner above everyone else, didn't align with Indigenous way of thinking. So they proposed a showcase, which focused more on sharing and fostering community.
And it feels very much like a community. This isn't a pitch competition, which is very unique. It's a pitch showcase. It feels very collaborative. It feels very Indigenous.
This got us thinking, what are Indigenous approaches to entrepreneurship? And does it go beyond the textbook and what we've traditionally learned about social entrepreneurship?
What about the groups of entrepreneurs that don't flourish in the individualistic culture of competition? What about the other ideas that may need more guidance or a community to connect with to achieve the same caliber as the winner?
To answer our questions, we first met with Adaeze Hubbard, who led the Indigenous Tech Showcase.
So hi, Daisy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So can you tell listeners a little bit about yourself and explain what your role is in the Social Innovation Hub?
Yeah, so my name's Adaeze Hubbard. I am the venture manager at Innovate Calgary's Social Innovation Hub, and so my role is to really work with founders to help them navigate the ecosystem. I also do programming, so I champion our inclusive innovation portfolio. So I work a lot with founders that are creating social impact, but also founders who are equity seeking and underrepresented in the ecosystem.
You have set up quite a few pitch competitions and showcases for entrepreneurs. For our listeners, could you explain the difference between a pitch competition and a showcase?
Yeah, so the pitch competitions, or kind of as it says, a competition. So there's a first place, there's a second place, there's a third place, and then there's finalists. So not everybody is taking home the same thing. And so as much as you're, showcasing what you're doing, you're pitching to hopefully come with the big prize, whatever that may be. And that's kind of the competition. For the showcase, no matter how well you pitch or whatnot, you proved, what your business is doing, the impact that you're bringing we still had like a pitch portion of the event, but it wasn't like, if you don't answer these right or you don't do this, then there's an opportunity that you don't get as much, or someone's going to take more, even if, you know, your business idea is solid, but you weren't maybe able to translate that properly or in the best that you wanted to because your nerves get the best of you. So pitch competitions are a little bit more stressful, I would say.
just a little bit.
Just a little, not too much.
So everyone's staring at you,
You know?
no pressure, lights on you.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. So for our listeners who are unfamiliar with the Indigenous Tech Showcase, could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the Indigenous Showcase is a part of our BIPOC and Rural Pitch series that Jerome, the Associate Director, kicked off in November of 2023. And really the purpose of this series was really to highlight and celebrate the work that diverse entrepreneurs are doing in the ecosystem, and especially in the tech ecosystem.
So did you face then any challenges with coming up with this or doing this?
So a lot of the events that we put on were actually pitch competitions. But speaking with our founders, speaking with the partners, we realized that that actually wasn't the best approach. When you look at the statistics, Indigenous people are still creating their space in the tech ecosystem. It's still a new and growing area. And so taking the approach, especially in Indigenous culture, isn't competition. It's about collaboration. And that's the kind of ecosystem we really wanted to bring in so that they could feel comfortable when they come in.
You mentioned the role of community. That's quite interesting. Could you explain more a bit about that with them, like how you've experienced it with entrepreneurship and the showcase?
Yeah, like being a founder is lonely. A lot of the times it feels like you're on your own and nobody else is experiencing what you're feeling. So community is so important. With all the founders that we even talk to, something that has been coming up is like they want that community. And it's not always even just with the organizations, but with other founders. And so also giving an opportunity for the 5 Indigenous founders that we hosted to come together and meet each other and to be like, oh, you've done this, you're working on this, and to share knowledge, to have conversations, to talk about challenges. I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that usually come out of these events.
So to go deeper into that connection thing, that's quite interesting because I've done competitions myself, and we really, when going with finalists, you don't really do that whole connection thing. It's more you see it as competition. Could you explain more about how those kind of connections happen and like what you kind of experienced?
Yeah, so prior to the Indigenous Showcase, we do it where each founder would then go into a room and have a chance, like 7 minutes with each investor. But what we were hearing was, one, there wasn't enough chances, like opportunity for real connections to be made, because how much can you really say in 7 minutes? By the time you introduce your business, it's like, okay, next, get out. But we instead, for the Indigenous Showcase, we did an investors circle. And so we brought everyone together in a circle. So Indigenous culture, as some of you may know, is that they have these circles that they come together, share knowledge, share stories, and all that. And it really creates a safe environment. And we really wanted to do that. And so we tried that approach out for the investor zone. And it was a completely different approach because you weren't just on your own sitting in a room with investors, like trying to pitch yourself. You got to ask questions. It was more intimate. There was more time spent, but also you didn't have to rely on like, okay, what questions do I have? Because now there's these 4 other finalists that may have questions too, and then you can kind of just lean on each other and roll off of each other on the different questions. And it was beautiful. Like the conversations that were had, founders felt it was way more impactful. And there's more of that, you know, face to the name. It wasn't like a quick 5-minute conversation. It was like, do you remember me? You know, we met for like 5 minutes briefly. We sat together now for an hour.
Thank you. That's been very insightful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today and share with our listeners your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Now let's hear from 2 participants from the showcase, James and Joshua. James McInnes is an Indigenous entrepreneur who founded the app Prompty, which is an app that simplifies the process of networking and relationship building. He places an emphasis on the value of networking and how wealth is found in relationships and contribution to the community over monetary value.
James, thanks for being here. Welcome to our podcast episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cole.
So you were a participant in the Indigenous Tech Showcase, hosted by the Social Innovation Hub. What was your experience like as an entrepreneur being part of this showcase?
It It was very collaborative. It's hard to describe it, but it was just a very different atmosphere. So when I love pitch competitions, and that's demonstrated from my beatboxing years. I'm a Canadian champion of beatboxing. I've done dozens of battles and internationally world championships a couple times too. So I really do like being on stage and performing and sharing value, inspiring others. So I love that. But what was so unique about this one is it wasn't a competition. Everybody was a winner. There were 5 of us who were allowed to enter that presentation stage, and we were all received the funds and the prizes. And it made it so that there was no competition. There was no thinking of, I wonder who is going to win. Because as soon as you start to objectify some of these pitches, then it falls into that transactional sort of area. And this is a big discussion actually in the beatboxing community. And I had this realization at the 2015 World Championships. I'm watching both these guys, and I'm thinking, who cares who wins? It's like comparing Beethoven to Mozart here. There's going to be preferences, right? And we're trying to, objectify these criteria so that we can choose a winner. But really, how is this serving the community overall? And I think both have their place. I think competitions really, really push they're very motivating, so they really push you to learn, challenge yourself, that sort of thing. So that's always good. I didn't feel that pressure at the showcase, but the pressure I did feel at the showcase was to represent my Indigenous heritage and to explain Prompty to everybody in the room. I was able to meet some other Indigenous company leaders, some Indigenous entrepreneurs, like Joshua Day Chief, as you mentioned. And then I also received $3,000. And even more impactful was the connections that I formed. So this was something that I was sharing with Jerome, who's the associate director there. I was sharing, the $3,000 was great, but even more valuable was the connection you made with a few of the people that he connected me with, which were worth a lot more than that money.
So your business, Prompty, is all about networking and connecting people with one another. Are there any challenges or problems with traditional networking that you're hoping to solve with Prompty?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's transactional. I think a lot of traditional networking methods are very transactional. And when you look at our economy as a whole, compared to an Indigenous economy as a whole, it's very transactional as opposed to relational. So in the Indigenous view of wealth is that it's the quality of your relationships and your contribution to the community, not your accumulation of physical possessions, right? So when we look at a transactional networking experience, that looks like, here's my paper business card, and I hand it to you, and you might give me one. Okay, excellent. And you leave that interaction, and 88% of business cards are thrown out within a week of being distributed. I have a big stack here that I might look through, and I can't remember who it's from or that conversation. You lose the information quickly. It's very transactional. And so I wanted to create a platform that is relational. So there's no news feed. Our business model is independent on advertising revenue. So we are not monetized by people's attention being on the platform. Using these strategies to create a more relational networking experience was the goal, and that's what we're working to solve from traditional networking.
That's great. So in that case, how would you define wealth and innovation when it comes to entrepreneurship?
There's the one story where there's the settlers come and they have their settlements, and they're giving the Indigenous chief a tour, and they bring him in and they have their big bank, and the chief looks at that and says, so do you put your money in the bank? And they said, yeah, that's where we store our money, and it gains interest, and we use it to build things, and everybody has their accounts. And it was just very surprising to the chief, because from his awareness and his how they'd run their communities, the money doesn't sit in a bank. It's distributed amongst the community, and it's used to build everybody up, and the wealth is sort of shared in that way. And so that's where that version of wealth, the Indigenous version, is that it's the quality of your relationships as well as your contribution to the community.
Well, thank you so much, James. I know that personally, your perspective regarding networking has been very insightful.
In conversation with our guests, we learned a lot about Indigenous ethical protocols that prioritize Indigenous ways of knowing when interacting with communities. On the topic of relationship building, treating your community like a family is a crucial part of Indigenous ethical protocols, even when running a business. This was shared by Joshua Daychief, founder of Advanced Ag, which is a family-owned business making strides to improve soil health for future generations.
Joshua, thanks for coming on to the podcast. So you're a participant in the Social Innovation Hub's Indigenous Tech Showcase. What was your experience like at this showcase?
Yeah, very cool. You know, the fact that we're uplifting Indigenous entrepreneurs and just Indigenous people. I mean, you guys know this. There's a movement right now, and I think it's long overdue. You know, just to speak to my story personally, being in the ag industry in the first few years where I'm just trying to build a reputation for the company and myself, I wouldn't say my last name, right? I'm like, this is Josh with Advanced Ag. We're dealing with a lot of rural communities, and reality is like there's still a lot of lack of education out there on what happened in residential schools, and there's still that perception like, oh, okay, well, byproducts from an Indigenous guy, and I hate to say that, like I wouldn't say my last name, but now I'm proud of it. To see the other Indigenous entrepreneurs in there doing some really cool stuff, it's so cool to see. And for them to showcase our company and myself, I think is really good, because I think that a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, really need a role model. Like, hey, that guy's Native. I can relate to him. If he's successful, then maybe I could be too. And I think there needs to be more of that as well. So more of the showcasing. I just thought it was awesome. It was well done. Adaize's fantastic, and the way that they did it was really cool. Just saw a lot of value in that. And who knows, maybe it touched someone's life where they're like, hey, I'm going to go start something now.
Well, has any Indigenous ways of knowing impacted your entrepreneurial journey or Advanced Ag?
If you would have asked me that 2 years ago, I'd say absolutely not. Like, it's just, I don't practice as much, and my dad is very, very in tune with the values and the traditions of our people. But what's interesting is now that I kind of look back, I believe we're a successful family-owned business because of some of the Indigenous ways of knowing. Like, I really had to reflect on it, and I think it's really ingrained into who we are as people here, as founders in the business. It's not necessarily, we're not smudging, all the time, or like having these big ceremonies, but just being close as a family. I remember growing up, around the reserve a lot, and that family closeness is a real thing, and it's something to admire with Indigenous people. There's just a closeness within the family, and that's something that my sister and I grew up around. And now we're here today, and my wife and my brother-in-law and my sister, and we're very, very tight-knit and very close, and it works. And so I would say, growing up and seeing how, a lot of our Indigenous family operated and, loved each other and everyone was close, we've kind of brought that into business.
Now, we were curious to learn about other perspectives to Indigenous entrepreneurship outside of this showcase. So, we met with business owner Colby Delorme, who is the founder of multiple companies, including Influence Mentoring Society, which mentors Indigenous youth, and Imagination Group, which provides consulting, Indigenous gifts, and ceremonial tobacco products. He shares how applying an Indigenous lens to entrepreneurship has influenced his business and values as an entrepreneur.
So to get things started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like what your background is, and what would you like the audience to just know about you?
Sure. So my name's Colby Delorme. My traditional name is Ostimao Napio. That's Cree for tobacco man. I'm 48 years old. I'm Métis, a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. My family's originally from Fisher Branch, Manitoba, which is close to Peguis First Nation. And my father's from Trinidad, so I'm also half Trinidadian. I live in Calgary. I've been in Treaty 7 since 1985, and I really interested in and passionate sort of about building businesses, being involved in mentorship, self-improvement, and sort of lifelong learning.
So in talking about community, how has your relationship to community helped navigate and shape your entrepreneurial journey?
In the very beginning, I would describe myself as just being an entrepreneur. So a BIPOC in entrepreneur, but at the time in 1994, we weren't using the term BIPOC. It wasn't advantageous to self-identify. I wasn't the type of person who didn't identify, but it's not what you led with. So you were just an entrepreneur who just happened to be half black and Métis and, all these different culminations of culture that are, found within myself. Now at this point, I'm deeply enrooted in community and culture in order to do the kind of work that we were doing. As this has grown, it's only become a more important component. Because I have a ceremonial tobacco manufacturing company, that company specifically only came to be because I went to community to ask for the right to be able to do it. So this is the very first time I've ever asked anyone for permission or understanding of what I want to do as an entrepreneur. But this is exactly the right way to be able to possess the tobacco, care for the tobacco, and in turn, be able to sell the tobacco. And for me, that lens has been more of, I'm not a different person, but the way I get from point A to point B is different than the way I used to do it. Probably from a Western sense, it's not the straightest line, but it's the most respectful line. And that business, I thought, was just going to be a really good, interesting, and lucrative business. But what's actually occurred is it's been a spiritual exploration for me. And I've come only closer to my heritage. So now I would say they're completely intertwined.
As you know, many entrepreneurs often have to compete in pitch competitions. What are your thoughts on these?
These pitch competitions, I sort of have maybe mixed reviews on them. I think they're a perfect fit for the people that they're designed for. Now, I think the problem with them is that you're creating this incredibly competitive environment, for individuals to work within, or to compete within. But the problem is that doesn't necessarily showcase who the best business is. It definitely showcases who can articulate their language the best or their business idea the best. But, not everybody who has the best idea has that ability to elevate themselves. You've got people, great ideas, and they maybe could articulate it, but they're absolutely paralyzed by being in this environment and not being able to do it. So I think they're good because they showcase businesses and they showcase people, and they have an ability to showcase our community. And they create opportunity. Without a doubt, they create opportunity. Negative, because if that's what we start to think is the best that's out there, we might have just put on a set of blinders.
So we've been discussing and learning about economic reconciliation. Do you mind explaining that for people who may not be familiar with the concept and how it aligns with business development?
Yeah, so economic reconciliation is obviously a component of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. So if you were to look at call to action number 92, that focuses specifically on business. There's components to call to action number 92, which is really talking about making business an equitable space for Indigenous people. It's definitely about support and sponsorship within the business space. So that specifically ties into economics and the economy in Canada. So if we're going to create an environment that's inclusive for all people, but in this case, being inclusive of the Indigenous community, this is about creating opportunities for all Indigenous people in all areas of the economy in Canada. That would be economic reconciliation. And what we are asking for is to not be given token opportunities, but actually to be a voice at the table, and for us, for free and prior informed consent. So we really want to be partners within the economy in Canada.
When talking about economic reconciliation, do you have any suggestions on how we could implement it, or any more inclusive ways for Indigenous peoples within the space of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. So our community does not look at economics in the same way. Like, I can't say that all of our people don't. I think many of us, including myself, we're probably far more Western in our approaches. We're using Western constructs to develop business the way we would not only develop but build them and, work within Canada. But if we were to look at it from an Indigenous lens, we would do a number of things. We look at things from a community-centered values. So how is it that, do we ensure that we are taking care of all things, right? So we have this respect for interconnectedness. We are ensuring that relationship with people are first and paramount. But it's that future generations that's foundational for us. It's everything that we talk about. We like to make sure that, that we are sustaining the health and the resilience of our community rather than just as a tool for gain, right? So, and that's a very different thing than the way we would look at business in a Western construct, right? That's completely different. One of the things that is incredibly important is this idea of two-eyed seeing, right? We don't want to state that Indigenous ways is the only way. We also don't want to say that, Western ways is the best way. There is somewhere in the middle where we take the best of both worlds and we bring them together. So I think in our idea of entrepreneurialism or in building businesses that we are taking that two-eyed seeing approach, that we're bringing these together. But just a last couple thoughts is that that this idea of an inclusive model that we're using within entrepreneurship, one that respects diversity, perspectives, and prioritizes solutions that are sustainable and ethical, right? You need them both. And then this idea of looking to future generations. Everything that we do, we want to say, what are we doing 7 generations out? That is a benchmark that continues to move with time, right? So we're always cognizant of that next generation. So that would be my way of explaining, how we as Indigenous people look at entrepreneurialism.
So with your experience as someone who's worked for nonprofit and in managing companies, for people who are looking to indigenize entrepreneurship, what would be some advice you would give them?
I think this is it's a complex question. I don't think this is one that's simple to answer. It's not one where everyone would see it the same way. So the first one that I would specifically talk about would be this idea of fostering an entrepreneurial approach that emphasizes community-centered goals, relationality, and long-term sustainability rather than short-term profit. But also creating a more culturally responsive support structures for Indigenous entrepreneurs. How do we encourage this ability for people to be able to do this? This is a big one for us because Indigenous people could become entrepreneurs but not all Indigenous people can go and get a formal education. So this is one where someone can learn while they're actually making money. Mentorship and funding programs that understand and respect Indigenous values and economic priorities, such as community benefit, environmental stewardship, and reciprocity. Secondly, I would talk about sort of integrating Indigenous approaches, specifically into curriculum of entrepreneurialism. One, I think it fits really well into the EDI space and corporate culture space when we talk about things. And Indigenous ways of being and knowing work well for our community, but you could apply them across all sorts of demographics of marginalized communities. So I think that would be something that would be really important. But lastly, I think we should be encouraging partnerships that bridge cross-cultural knowledge systems. So Indigenous, non-Indigenous, and this, I believe, would really lead to this meaningful social innovation. And then these partnerships could be built on a foundation of equity and informed consent that would align with that truth and reconciliation call to action number 92. So I think that's how I would look at us being able to indigenize that space.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy day to speak with us and give us your valuable insight. We very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts.
From our conversations with Adaeze, James, Joshua, and Colby, we learned about various Indigenous perspectives to social entrepreneurship and how it's grounded in community well-being, reciprocity, and a future-oriented lens of innovation.
This expanded our perspective from an individualistic, competitive idea of entrepreneurship that functioned on this concept of win-win-win,
to now shifting to the idea of community and sharing our knowledge and resources so that everyone wins.
We've looked at redefining innovation from the next profitable thing to what would be best for future generations.
These businesses redefine the intersection of culture and commerce through honoring traditional knowledge when navigating modern economic systems and entrepreneurial innovation.
It is important to recognize that entrepreneurship takes place in a cultural context of values and practices. There are many ways that social enterprises can thrive, and the pitch competition is not a one-size-fits-all method.
We'd like to thank our guests for sharing their knowledge with us and recognize a variety of perspectives towards social innovation and entrepreneurship exists.
If you're curious about entrepreneurship or an entrepreneur yourself, the Social Innovation Hub is a great resource to find your community. More information is provided on their website, innovatecalgary.com.
As we part with you, our guests share their final insights.
We're very, very lucky to have what we have here in Alberta in particular. There's a lot of funding opportunities, not just for Indigenous founders, but for businesses in general. And that's not the case, in other parts around North America. So in terms of like the social innovation kind of network, it's really solid here. And I really, truly believe like people are here to help you.
Whether that's using Prompty, whether that's using some other means, I really hope that the takeaway today for you is that you can achieve so much more by expanding your network.
Most problem-solving innovation has come from entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial spirit. This is something that Indigenous people have had since time immemorial. So when we solve problems, we're typically seeing a individual who's come up with some sort of strategy, some sort of product or service. I think Indigenous people are poised to be able to address some of those challenges, but collectively we all have to be open to those ideas of being able to do it and allowing for our first people to be the ones who could help lead some of that.